This will be for the con exercise, differentiate products. All right, so the product rule is for when you're taking the derivative of two terms that are multiplied by each other. Okay, so you rewrite the first term, f of x, times the derivative of the second term, and then add the second term times the derivative of the first term. Okay, you're just adding here, so the order doesn't matter, but the way I remember it, first times the derivative of the second, plus the second times the derivative of the first. Okay, also, they used f of x and g of x, and you'll see possibly people using different letters. Okay, one way I like to do it is u times v prime plus v times u prime. Okay, u being the first term and v being the second term. All right, it's basically the same thing, but that's the formula for the derivative of a product. All right, so here they want us to find the derivative, dy dx, of this right here. This is basically the cosine of x times x to the third. Okay, so I'll let the cosine of x equal u, and I'll let x to the third equal v. Okay, I'm going to do some of my work in the margin here. So since u is the cosine of x, the derivative of u prime, we know that the derivative of the cosine is the negative sign. And then for v, we have x to the third. And the derivative of v, the derivative of x to the third, just use the power rule. Move the exponent 3 out front. And then do minus 1 on the exponent. 3 minus 1 is just 2. All right, so now we have everything we need for the formula. All right, so we said at the beginning the derivative. You could say y prime or dy dx. Same thing, basically. We said it's going to be the first, which is u, times the derivative of the second, v prime, plus the second, which is v, times the derivative of the first, u prime. Okay, so for u, we said that's the cosine of x. And for v prime, we said that's 3x squared. So that's times 3x squared. All right, you can use more parentheses if you want. Plus, v is x to the third, and u prime is negative sine of x. All right, it's not multiple choice, so they should take it in this form. If you want to clean it up, we can put the 3x squared in front of the cosine. All right, 3x squared times cosine of x. And here we have a negative sign. We can move that out front. This is positive times negative. It's going to be a negative x to the third times the sine of x. All right, so that's it. Nothing to simplify or combine. All right, 3x squared times cosine of x minus x to the third times sine of x. In order to get that dot for times, you can use this menu here, or you can hit Shift 8 for the little asterisk, and it will give you the dot. But you really don't even need it. Okay, if there were nothing in between the 3x squared and the cosine of x, it's automatically multiplication. All right, here we have x to the fourth times ln of x. We're finding the derivative as usual, but we have to get it in the form that they have it in. All right, so let's do our work first, and then we'll factor or whatever if we have to. All right, we'll say x to the fourth is the first term. We'll call that u. And we'll say ln of x is the second term. We'll call that v. All right, these are multiplied by each other, so we're just using the product rule. All right, so u, the first term, is x to the fourth. And that means u prime, the derivative, just power rule, move the 4 in front of the x. So that's going to be a 4x, decrease the exponent by 1. So 4 minus 1 is 3. And now we'll do v. V is ln of x. And v prime, if you recall the previous exercise, the derivative of ln of x is just 1 over x. All right, so now we have everything we need for the product rule. All right, so we said it is, the derivative is going to be first times the derivative of the second plus the second times the derivative of the first. Okay, u is the first term and v is the second term. So for u, that's x to the fourth. For v prime, that's 1 over x. So that's going to be times 1 over x. Plus sign. V is going to be ln of x. And u prime is going to be 4x to the third. All right, simplifying here. This is times, so this is basically over 1. We can cancel x to the fourth over x. Remember, this is x to the first, and when you divide exponents, you just divide a variable with an exponent, the same base. You subtract going down, so it's just 4 minus 1, so this becomes x to the third, and the x cancels. Okay, and these are all ones here, so it's just x to the third plus ln of x times 4x to the third. Now, based on their answers, I'm pretty sure they're just going to factor out an x to the third. All right, so I'll do it right here. X to the third. Since we have it here and here, I'm going to factor it out. X to the third divided by x to the third is just 1. X to the third divided by ln of x times 4x to the third is just going to be 4 times ln of x. Okay, if you want to double check, just distribute. X to the third times 1 is x to the third. X to the third times 4 ln of x is going to be 4x to the third times ln of x. That's what we have here. So hopefully the answer is in this form. All right, it is clearly answer A. They just wrote it backwards from what I did. Same thing. All right, so we're finding the derivative. So we have 1 over x times e to the x. Okay, the 1 over x is going to be the u, and e to the x is going to be the v. All right. So u is going to equal 1 over x. However, we want to put this in negative exponent form. So this is actually the equivalent of x to the negative 1. All right. And in that case, it's easier to find the derivative of u, or u prime. So remember, you move the negative 1 out front. So that's negative 1x. And you decrease the exponent by 1. Negative 1 minus 1 is going to be negative 2. Okay. And of course, you really don't need the 1 in the front, so you can just eliminate that 1. All right. And next up, the v, that's e to the x. All right. So v is e to the x. And if you remember, the derivative of e to the x is still just e to the x. All right, so we have v and v prime, and we have u and u prime. And now we can apply the product rule. We have f of x. We're going to do f prime of x first times the derivative of the second plus the second times the derivative of the first. U is the first. That's x to the negative 1. I'm going to write it as 1 over x. All right, generally for the multiple choice problems, they don't have negative exponents, just so you know. And that's going to be times v prime, that's e to the x, plus v, which is e to the x, times u prime, which is negative x to the negative 2. All right, let me rewrite that just as well. U prime is negative x to the negative 2, but that is the equivalent of negative 1 over x squared. Okay, like I said, try to get rid of negative exponents if you have multiple choices. All right, so u prime right here is negative 1 over x squared. All right, that's going to be negative 1 over x squared. And knowing Khan Academy, they're going to factor out e to the x. So let's do that. All right, factor out e to the x. E to the x times 1 over x divided by e to the x, that's just 1 over x, plus e to the x we factored out, and we're left with negative 1 over x squared. All right, forget about that plus. We'll make it negative 1 over x squared. Okay, hopefully that's one of the answers. Or they might have it as, now you know what? That's probably it right there. If not, I'll manipulate it further. Okay, fingers crossed that that's one of the answers. The multiple choices are the more difficult ones in this one. All right, got it. It's answer C. Just a heads up, Khan Academy, for their multiple choices, they generally factor it out in factored form. They generally get rid of negative exponents for their multiple choice answers. All right, so that's it right there, answer C. All right, if it were not multiple choice, you could enter negative exponents in the box and stuff. Those ones are actually easier. All right, one more. First term is cosine of x. Second term is x to the negative 2. So this is going to be u, and this is going to be v. All right, so u equals the cosine of x. And the derivative of u is going to be the negative sine of x. Okay, derivative of cosine is negative sine. And v is going to equal x to the negative 2. And the derivative of v prime, you move the negative 2 out front, so it's going to be negative 2x, decrease the exponent by 1. Negative 2 minus 1 is negative 3. Now, on this one, it's not multiple choice. It's just to enter in the box. But I want you to try to get into the habit. I want to teach you at least to get rid of the negative exponents. So this v right here, x to the negative 2, that's the equivalent of 1 over x squared. Okay? And this v prime right here, this is the equivalent of negative 2, and x to the negative 3 is the same as x to the positive 3 in the denominator. All right. Like I said, if it's open, if the box is open, you could use negative exponents. But if it's multiple choice, they will not have the negative exponents. All right, so let's see. F prime of x, that's going to be the first times the derivative of the second plus the second times the derivative of the first. The first is u, that's cosine of x. V prime, we said, was negative 2 over x to the third. Plus v, we said v was 1 over x squared. And u prime is going to be negative sine of x. All right. So let's see. We can bring the negative 2 out front and make it negative 2 cosine of x divided by x to the third. And we can bring the negative sign out front here as well. We have sine of x divided by x squared. Now, that is really the answer. But with Khan Academy, you never know what they're going to do. So, like I said, you can enter this in the box. But if it's multiple choice, what they may have done, since this is x to the third and this is x squared, they might say, well, let's make a common denominator. And I'll take this one and multiply it by x over x. Okay, x over x is the same as times 1. And this would make this equal to negative x times sine of x. And in the denominator, x times x squared would be x to the third. Okay, and then what they would do negative 2 cosine of x minus x sine of x all over x to the third. I'm going to enter that in the box, but I'm just trying to show you what it might be if it were multiple choice. All right, negative 2 cosine x minus x sine of x all over x to the third.